Railway stations promise movement, arrival departure, escape. But these cursed British railway stations kept something darker beneath the platforms: graves, collisions, morgues, tunnels, and journeys that never reached the next stop. 1. Birmingham New Street Station, Birmingham, West Midlands. Birmingham New Street is cursed by ground that was forced to move before the trains ever did. The station officially opened in 1854, built in a low, crowded part of central Birmingham once associated with the froggery. It was a place of poor housing, old streets, difficult drainage, and earlier burial grounds. Railway progress demanded space, and Victorian progress rarely asked gently. The rails came in. The old ground was cut, sold, cleared, and covered. That is the wound beneath New Street. Local history connects the area with Birmingham's early Jewish burial ground, and later railway expansion disturbed other burial spaces connected with the city's religious communities. A railway station is supposed to organize movement above the earth. At New Street, the curse begins with movement below it. Bodies removed, graves altered, human rest made secondary to timetables. The platform is the object that carries the curse. A platform is a place of waiting. People stand there between one life and another, leaving home, returning from work, meeting someone, escaping something, ending something. That makes Platform 4 darker folklore feel painfully precise. Stories speak of a Victorian gentleman named Claude, a regular commuter who took poison there, turning a public waiting space into a private last room. This is why New Street feels cursed rather than merely busy. It is built from layers of interruption. A slum erased, a burial ground disturbed, a platform marked by despair, a station designed for movement, standing over those who were denied rest. Later accounts of cold patches, sudden panic, strange figures, and failing devices belong to the same deeper anxiety. New Street is a machine for arrival and departure, but some of its oldest debts are not travelling anywhere. At Birmingham New Street, the trains keep moving. That is the problem. Because beneath the platform, the ground remembers everyone who was moved without consent. 2. Shrewsbury Railway Station, Shrewsbury, Shropshire. Shrewsbury Station is cursed by a man who still seems to be waiting for a train that never came. The station's old architecture gives it a ceremonial feeling. Platforms, ornate gates, ironwork roof lines, and the sense of Victorian rail travel as public theatre. But one winter death turned Platform 3 into something colder than a place of travel. In 1888, heavy snow brought part of the station roof down. The victim most often named in the story is Thomas Thomas, a local coal merchant and public figure. He was waiting for a train when the roof failed, crushing him before the journey could begin. The watch is the object to remember. In local tradition, his figure is seen checking the time and looking down the line as if the train is still expected. That detail is devastating because railway time is supposed to be exact. Timetables promise order, watches promise control. But the roof fell from above, and time became useless. Shrewsbury's curse is not only about one accident. It is about trust in the station itself. Passengers do not look up at every beam. They trust the roof. They trust the platform. They trust that waiting is safe. When a station kills someone before the train arrives, the entire purpose of the place is reversed. Other stories add colder layers. A chill where postal workers were said to have died on the line, and a monk emerging from an underground service tunnel after the last train has gone. The tunnel matters because every station has a hidden underside staff, passengers' service routes, unseen labour beneath public movement. 2 stations in and the pattern is clear. These are not simple railway ghost stories. They are broken contracts. New Street broke rest beneath the ground. Shrewsbury broke safety above the platform. At Shrewsbury Station, the cursed image is not a face in the dark. It is a man looking at his watch after time has already failed him. 3. Carlisle Railway Station and Undercroft, Carlisle, Cumbria. Carlisle Station is cursed by what lies under the platforms. That is where its power is. Built in the 1840s and later expanded, Carlisle Citadel became one of the great railway junctions of northern England, serving multiple railway companies and routes towards Scotland, the west coast, the settled Carlisle line, and beyond. Above ground, it was a machine of connection. Below ground, the undercroft held service rooms, passageways, offices, and hidden working spaces. The undercroft is the cursed object. A railway undercroft is not made for passengers to understand. It is the underside of travel. Storage, staff, movement, maintenance, dark rooms, doors without public purpose. In folklore, that hidden space gives the station its second life. Stories from Carlisle speak of a headless man on platform 8, a veiled woman in upper corridors, a small boy with a dog, shadowy forms, crying red mist, and figures connected with the undercroft. But the strongest curse is not any single figure. It is dislocation, a head without a body, a child beside a dog, a woman behind a veil, a pointing man linked to the underground spaces. All of them feel like fragments of a station too large to hold its own dead in one place. Railway stations create fragments by nature. A person is seen only briefly, on a platform, through a window, at a stair, under a clock, passing in a crowd. Carlisle's stories use that same logic. Nothing stays long enough to explain itself. That is why the undercroft matters so much. It suggests that the visible station is only the top layer of a deeper system. By now, the railway curse has gone from buried ground to collapsed roof, and now to a station with a second body beneath the first. At Carlisle, the passenger sees the platform. The curse sees the undercroft, and what walks below does not always know how to return whole. 4. Glasgow Central Station, Glasgow, Scotland. Glasgow Central is cursed by rooms beneath the city's pride. Opened by the Caledonian Railway in 1879, the station became one of Scotland's great gateways. Glass iron platforms, bridges, and the huge confidence of Victorian transport. But the station's hidden spaces tell another story. Beneath the public concourse are tunnels, old rooms, stores, and traces of the working city below the polished routes of passengers. The boiler room is the first object to fear. A boiler room belongs to heat, pressure, labour, and machinery. In folklore attached to Glasgow Central, a woman is seen in an old boiler room, sometimes linked to a darker story of a businessman ruined in 1929 and a wife murdered for insurance money. Whether legend or inherited station tale, the moral shape is unmistakable. Financial collapse turned into domestic betrayal. The grain store is the second object. A tall, thin woman with long hair has been seen in a former grain store, while below the station a little girl is also sometimes reported. These spaces matter because they remind us that a station is not only platforms. It is storage, delivery, fuel, goods, food, money, labour, and the bodies that kept the city moving. Glasgow Central's curse is therefore not one apparition. It is the hidden economy under the glamour. The public station says progress. The lower rooms say cost. A business fails. A woman is killed. A child appears beneath the station. A storehouse becomes a place where human memory is shelved with the goods. The strongest railway curses often live in service spaces because that is where the public story disappears. Passengers see destinations. Workers see pipes, walls, coal dust, grain, machinery, and doors that lead away from light. At Glasgow Central, the curse is not on the timetable. It is in the rooms that made the timetable possible. And below the city's grandest railway roof, something still walks through the cost of progress. 5. Hopetown, Darlington North Road Station Museum, Darlington, County Durham. Hopetown, Darlington is cursed by a carriage that refuses to become only an exhibit. The site preserves one of the most important railway stories in Britain, connected with the early Stockton and Darlington railway world. It is now a museum of movement and engineering, but the darker folklore of North Road Station belongs to people whose journeys ended inside the railway system rather than beyond it. The third-class carriage is the object to watch. A young girl in Victorian clothing has been seen there, and childlike singing and laughter have been reported. Third class matters. It was the carriage of lesser comfort, lesser money, lesser importance. Even in the railway's promise of movement, class travelled with the passenger. A child inside that carriage makes the exhibit feel like a compartment of unfinished innocence. The other story is older and sharper. Tales of a shadowy man with a black dog have been told since the 19th century. The figure is often linked with Thomas Munro Winter, who died by suicide at the station. A heritage account preserves the story of a night watchman seeing a man in old-fashioned dress accompanied by a black dog near the station's lower spaces. That gives Hopetown a double curse. The carriage holds childhood. The dog holds pursuit. Dogs in folklore can be guardians, omens, or hunters. Here the black dog makes the station feel less like a museum and more like a crossing point between railway memory and judgment. Other reports mention knocking sounds and a man in a red jacket staring at train controls. That detail brings the curse back to function. Levers engines discipline orders. Railways are built on control, and cursed railway stories often begin when control fails. At Hopetown, Darlington, the museum preserves engines and carriages. But preservation is not always peace. Sometimes a display case only fixes the past in place, while the child keeps laughing in third class, and the black dog waits near the door. 6. Thorpe Thewles Railway Station, Stockton-on-Tees, County Durham. Thorpe Thewles is cursed by the shortcut. That is the detail that matters. The former station now belongs to Wynyard Woodland Park, and station house life a quieter place than the working railway world it once served. But railways change the meaning of land. A footpath becomes dangerous. A familiar track becomes fatal. A local shortcut can turn into the last decision a person ever makes. In February 1908, James Thompson took a shortcut along the railway near Thorpe Thewles and was struck by a train. That documented death gives the station's darker folklore a hard centre. There are other stories of a figure seen at the old station and older claims of a station master connected with a death on the premises. But the track death is the most powerful cursed element because it belongs to railway logic itself. The track is the object here. A track looks simple. 2 rails, 1 direction, a route made visible. But a track is not a road. It does not forgive hesitation. It does not swerve. It belongs to the train before it belongs to the walker. That is the curse of Thorpe Thewles. Not a dramatic murder in a waiting room. A human body misjudging industrial certainty. Railway folklore often treats trains as fate, because they combine speed, weight, and schedule. Once the engine is coming, the person on the line has almost no bargaining power. The track has already chosen the outcome. The old station's later quiet makes the story colder. Tea rooms, woodland walks, and heritage calm sit on top of a place where movement once carried lethal force. At Thorpe Thewles, the warning is not hidden. It is the rail itself. A shortcut can feel like freedom for a few seconds. Then the timetable arrives, and the land remembers who had no time left to cross. 7. Huddersfield Railway Station, Huddersfield, West Yorkshire. Huddersfield Station is cursed by labour turned bitter. The station is one of the great classical railway buildings of northern England, fronting St. George Square with columns and stone dignity. It looks almost like a temple to transport. But its darker tradition belongs not to grandeur, but to a porter. The porter is the object of the curse, not the man alone. The role. A porter carried the weight of the railway on his back and in his hands. Luggage parcels, instructions, complaints, timing platforms, passengers who wanted answers. Porters moved between public space and railway labour, visible but rarely honoured. Huddersfield folklore speaks of a bad-tempered porter, blamed for nips, shoves, cold spots, and threatening laughter. A local ghost trail names Jonah Marr, a 19th-century porter said to have suffered a severe accident on the tracks. Whether every detail has survived accurately or not, the cursed pattern is strong. A worker injured or embittered by the system remains attached to the station that used his body. The grip is the cursed sign. A nip, a shove, a sudden cold touch, these are not grand appearances. They are workmanlike interruptions. The railway porter does not deliver a speech. He makes contact. He reminds the passenger that travel was never effortless. Every elegant station depends on tired hands, strained backs, and people whose names fall out of history faster than train numbers. That is what makes Huddersfield different from the others. The curse is not aristocratic, criminal, or spectacular. It is occupational. The station may look noble, but the story asks whose labour held up that nobility. At Huddersfield railway station, the warning does not come from a tunnel or morgue. It comes from the unseen hand of work itself. And when something shoves you near the platform, the station may be remembering the men who spent their lives keeping everyone else moving. 8. Salisbury Station, Salisbury, Wiltshire. Salisbury Station ends this episode with a waiting room that became a morgue. That is one of the strongest railway curses possible. In the early hours of the 1st of July, 1906, a London and South Western Railway boat train derailed at the eastern end of Salisbury Station. The train failed to take the curve safely and crashed with catastrophic force. 28 people died. The ladies' waiting room on Platform 4 was used as a temporary morgue. That is the final object, the waiting room. A waiting room is supposed to be temporary comfort. A bench, a door a few minutes out of the weather before the journey continues. It is a room built around the assumption that everyone inside is going somewhere. In 1906, that meaning collapsed. The room stopped waiting for passengers and began receiving bodies. This is why Salisbury belongs last. It turns the railway promise inside out. The station was designed for movement, but the waiting room became the place where movement ended. Luggage clothing, broken bodies, and shocked officials replaced ordinary passengers. The refreshment room became first aid. The waiting room became death administration. Cold spots, later reported, they make sense as folklore because the room's purpose was so violently reversed. Even without believing in appearances, the curse is emotionally undeniable. A space built for travellers became a holding place for the dead. Salisbury's disaster also shows how railway tragedy can be both mechanical and intimate. Speed curve signalling, timing train weight, all huge forces. Yet the result was carried into one room where individual bodies had to be named, mourned, and prepared. That is the difference between accident and curse. An accident happens once. A curse is the meaning that refuses to leave the room. At Salisbury Station, the last stop was not on the timetable. It was behind the door of the ladies' waiting room. Railway stations promise that every platform leads somewhere. But these 8 kept darker destinations. Disturbed graves, collapsed roofs, hidden undercrofts, black dogs, fatal tracks, bitter labour, and a waiting room turned morgue. If one station stayed with you, leave its name below and stay with History Legends docs.